Listen. What I'm about to tell you will sound cold at first. Like you're pulling away, like you're giving up. But it's not about quitting. It's about reclaiming gravity. The kind that makes people turn toward you instead of away. Because there comes a moment in every relationship when you realize you've been running too hard toward someone who isn't moving at all. You've been over-explaining, over-giving, over-proving. And somewhere along the way, love stopped feeling like connection and started feeling like performance. It's subtle. You don't notice it at first. You start picking up small changes, her tone when you talk, her delayed replies, her new kind of silence. The kind that doesn't mean peace, but distance. You think, maybe I said something wrong. You try harder. You text more, plan more, accommodate more. You become predictable, safe, soft. You think consistency will fix it, but what you're really doing is training her nervous system to stop noticing you. You've stopped being a mystery. You've become maintenance. That's when something inside you breaks, quietly, but completely. You realize that chasing doesn't make you loved. It just makes you exhausted. So you stop. Not out of bitterness. Not to prove anything. But because you finally understand a truth that few people ever grasp. When you stop chasing, you stop leaking energy. And when you stop leaking energy, you stop becoming magnetic again. This isn't about playing games. It's about rebalancing a dynamic that's been off for years. Because attraction isn't sustained by closeness. It's sustained by polarity. You've been flooding the system with your presence, and she's been drowning in it. So when you pull back, you're not punishing her. You're giving both of you oxygen. At first, the silence feels unbearable. Every instinct screams at you to fix it. To send a text. To call. To explain. To make sure she knows you care. But this is where the real transformation begins, because the moment you resist that impulse, you start to separate love from fear. You see, most men confuse attachment with devotion. They think closeness equals safety. But real strength isn't in holding on, it's in knowing when to let go without falling apart. When you finally stop chasing, the energy shifts. She feels it, even if she doesn't admit it. She'll sense that something invisible just changed. The dynamic flips. You're no longer orbiting around her approval. You're centered again, still, focused. That shift creates what psychologists call reversal of attention flow. When someone who's used to receiving constant validation suddenly doesn't, their brain goes into search mode. It starts to replay memories, moments, details, looking for the missing stimulus. That's when she starts to notice things again. The tone of your voice, your posture, your absence. But you won't see it yet, because the first thing she'll show isn't curiosity, it's irritation. That's how the process starts. The first phase is resistance. The mind resists change before it accepts it. She'll test the new boundaries. She'll accuse you of being cold, distant, uncaring. She'll push buttons that used to make you chase. You'll feel that old urge to prove yourself again. But if you do, if you cave, if you explain, if you beg, you'll reset the clock to zero. Because the power of distance doesn't come from ignoring someone, it comes from mastering yourself. The truth is, she's not reacting to your silence. She's reacting to your stability. To the energy she can't shake anymore. To the peace that doesn't revolve around her moods. It unnerves her, because she's used to being the emotional center of your world. And suddenly, that gravity is gone. But here's the paradox. The more you try to make someone see your worth, the less they value it. The moment you stop trying, you create space for them to rediscover it on their own. That's not manipulation. It's nature. Human attention follows scarcity, and scarcity is born from self-control. This is why the moment you stop chasing her, you start rebuilding yourself. The energy that used to fuel anxiety now fuels discipline. The time you used to spend refreshing your messages becomes time in the gym, time with purpose, time in silence. That's when the transformation begins. Because detachment isn't the death of love, it's the resurrection of self-respect. When you stop chasing, you're not rejecting her. You're reminding her, and yourself, that love without respect is just dependence. And the first few weeks of this change are chaos. She'll test you. The world will test you. Even your own emotions will test you. You'll doubt yourself, you'll question your motives, you'll feel the ache of withdrawal. Because you're not just breaking a pattern with her, you're breaking an addiction to external validation. But once you make it through that initial storm, something incredible happens. You start to breathe differently. You start to walk slower. You stop explaining yourself. You start living from your center instead of your edges. That's when people start to notice. Not just her, everyone. You're not seeking attention, but you're commanding it. Because people can feel when you've reclaimed your energy. It's quiet, it's steady, it's grounded. And here's the part no one tells you. When she feels that shift, she won't understand it logically. She'll feel it biologically. Her nervous system will register the loss of energy she once fed on, and it'll start craving your presence again. That's when curiosity returns. But you can't chase it. You have to let it find you. That's the first step in this journey. The moment you stop chasing, you stop bleeding value. You stop needing validation to feel alive. And that's when real attraction begins, not just from her, but from life itself. Because the man who stops chasing doesn't become cold. He becomes still. And stillness, in a noisy world, is power. The first few days after you stop chasing feel like withdrawal. You've been feeding on constant feedback, her messages, her tone, her attention, and now, all that noise is gone. The silence is loud. It rings in your head when you wake up and follows you through your day. You reach for your phone, muscle memory guiding your thumb to where her name used to light up the screen. But there's nothing. Just a blank notification bar and the reflection of your own face. This is the moment that separates the men who relapse from the ones who transform. Because that silence you're hearing isn't punishment, it's detox. You're breaking free from the chemical loop of validation. See, every good morning text, every affectionate reply, every small reassurance triggered a hit of dopamine. It felt like connection, but it was really dependency. You built your peace around her presence, so when that presence disappears, your nervous system panics. That panic isn't love. It's addiction. Most men mistake the discomfort of withdrawal for the absence of love. They can't stand the silence, so they break it. Send a text, make a call, reach out, just to check in. And in doing so, they reset the entire cycle of dependency they were trying to escape. The trick isn't to fill the silence, it's to endure it until it becomes peace. Because in that silence, your real identity starts to surface. When you stop orbiting someone else's emotions, you have to face your own. That's the terrifying part. You start realizing how much of yourself you've given away. Your time, your energy, your opinions. You catch yourself changing your tone, your behavior, even your dreams to stay comfortable in a relationship that might have stopped seeing you long ago. You begin to see how subtle the erosion was. How easily you traded authenticity for approval. This phase, this withdrawal, is where you rebuild your center. Not by replacing her with distractions or by pretending you don't care, but by sitting in the emptiness until it teaches you something. Because the man who can sit alone in silence without reaching for comfort becomes untouchable. It's not coldness. It's clarity. And clarity is magnetic. During this time, you'll start to notice how much of the world runs on noise. Constant scrolling, constant messaging, constant noise to avoid being alone with thoughts. But now, your silence makes you different. It separates you from the chaos. People won't understand it. They'll ask why you've gone quiet, why you're different. They'll assume something's wrong. But what's really happening is that you're detoxing from external control. You're not reacting anymore. You're recalibrating. When you stop chasing, you start seeing patterns clearly. Not just in her, but in yourself. You start to recognize where you overextended, where you lost boundaries, where you accepted less than you deserved because you were scared to lose connection. You begin to see how much of your energy was invested in trying to control what couldn't be controlled. Another person's attention, affection, or appreciation. That's the lie most men live inside, that if they just do everything right, love will last. But love doesn't respond to effort, it responds to authenticity. So while she's reacting to your absence, confused, irritated, curious, you're finally reacting to your own presence. This is where you turn inward, not in bitterness, but in reconstruction. You start to pick up pieces of yourself you left scattered around her moods. You reconnect with things that used to make you feel alive before you forgot who you were. You spend more time in your body, training, running, lifting, working. You reconnect with purpose. You start focusing on what makes you magnetic again. Discipline, creativity, focus, calmness. And while you're doing this, she'll start to notice. At first, it'll be subtle. A glance that lingers a little longer. A message that feels softer. A memory she brings up for no reason. But you won't react, because you're not doing this for a reaction. You're doing this because you finally understand that love built on chasing isn't love, it's dependency dressed in affection. You start realizing how different peace feels compared to validation. Validation feels exciting, addictive, temporary. Peace feels slow, steady, powerful. Validation needs constant renewal. Peace doesn't. That's what this phase is teaching you. The hardest part of the withdrawal stage is that you'll feel detached not just from her, but from the old version of yourself. You'll start to feel distance from the man who used to beg, overgive, and apologize for existing. And losing that version of yourself feels like grief, because it is. You're mourning the death of the man you were when you didn't know your worth. But as that version fades, something new takes shape. You begin to operate differently. You speak slower. You listen more. You don't explain yourself as much. You start saying no to things that drain you. You stop asking for permission to be respected. And in this new rhythm, something paradoxical happens. The more you detach from needing her attention, the more she starts to seek yours. Because what she's drawn to now isn't the man who begged for validation, it's the man who doesn't need it. That's the quiet shift. The power inversion. You don't have to prove your value anymore. You live it. You don't have to ask to be seen. Your silence speaks louder than any words you could have said. And when she starts to feel that change, when she feels the weight of your absence, it triggers reflection. She starts replaying things, the small ways she dismissed you, the moment she took you for granted, the warmth she used to feel when you were near. But you can't rush that process. You can't interfere. You just hold your ground and keep building yourself. Because withdrawal isn't about punishing her, it's about purifying you. The silence is your reset button. The stillness is your therapy. Most men never make it past this phase because they confuse stillness with stagnation. But what's really happening here is the beginning of transformation, from emotional dependence to emotional sovereignty. And once you pass through this fire, once you learn to sit with the silence without reaching for comfort, you come out of it different. Not colder, just calmer. And that calmness, that's when everything starts to shift. Something begins to change right around the time you stop expecting it. You're no longer counting days. You're not checking your phone every few minutes, hoping for a text. You've surrendered to the silence, and in doing so, something subtle but powerful begins to shift, not in her first, but in you. You've stopped broadcasting need. That quiet desperation that used to live in your tone, your timing, your words, it's gone. You've replaced it with something most people don't even recognize at first glance: stillness. And stillness in a man, real grounded calm, radiates a kind of gravity that can't be faked. At first, she won't know what she's feeling. She'll sense something's off, but she won't call it missing you. She'll just feel a strange imbalance, like a frequency she used to tune into has suddenly gone silent. The truth is, she got used to being the center of your attention. She was calibrated to your emotional availability. Every time you texted, called, explained, apologized, you were feeding her subconscious need for certainty. Now that energy is gone, and her nervous system starts searching for it. That's how the shift begins, not through thought, but through feeling. See, human relationships are energetic before they're emotional. The body feels the loss before the mind rationalizes it. She'll find herself glancing at her phone, not sure why. She'll open your chat, reread old messages, hover over your name, and close it again. The absence is starting to speak louder than your words ever did. This is what most men never experience, because they never last long enough in the silence to let this stage unfold. They break too early, they reach out, they feed the cycle. But when you hold the line, something biological happens. Her brain begins to revalue you. See, what was once predictable becomes scarce, and what becomes scarce becomes valuable. This isn't manipulation, it's psychology. When you remove yourself from the constant supply of reassurance, you trigger a recalibration of importance. Her mind starts to wonder, why isn't he reaching out? Has he moved on? Is he angry? Has he changed? Every question she asks herself is a signal that the power dynamic has flipped. She used to feel certainty and you felt anxiety. Now she feels uncertainty and you feel calm. That reversal is what reignites attraction. Not control, not distance for its own sake, but the restoration of balance. During this stage, she'll start to test the waters. The messages won't be direct. Never are. They'll come disguised as casual contact. Hey, do you remember where we put that thing? I saw something today that reminded me of you. Or the classic, how have you been? They're not questions, they're probes. She's trying to feel out your emotional temperature, trying to see if the man she knew is still there waiting for her. But this is where discipline is everything. Because the moment you respond with that old energy, with eagerness, with excitement, with relief, you undo everything. You tell her subconsciously, nothing's changed. But if you respond calmly, briefly, respectfully, with the same composure she's never seen before, you send an entirely different message. I'm not angry, I'm just not dependent anymore. And that difference hits harder than any speech or confrontation ever could. Because here's what nobody tells you. She doesn't miss the version of you who begged for attention. She misses the version who was complete. The man she met when you still had your own center, your own direction, your own gravity. The man who wasn't afraid to walk away from comfort to protect his purpose. That's the version that starts to reappear in this phase. You start to notice how much stronger your boundaries have become. You're not performing anymore. You don't adjust your tone to keep the peace. You're no longer reacting to moods that aren't yours to fix. You've stopped auditioning for love. That stability is rare, and people can feel it. The irony is, the more detached you become from outcome, the more drawn she'll be to you. Not because of the distance itself, but because of the energy it represents, self-possession. She'll sense that your happiness no longer depends on her approval. And for the first time in a long time, she'll feel something real, uncertainty mixed with curiosity. That's what reignites attention. Not need. Mystery. But mystery isn't about hiding details. It's about having depth. And depth comes from a life that doesn't orbit one person. So while she's questioning, wondering, remembering, you're building. You're working out, reading more, connecting with friends, refining your purpose. You've replaced attachment with momentum. You've become the calm eye in the middle of the storm. And when you reach that point, you stop chasing because you finally understand this. You can't attract what you're trying to control. Control is fear. Calm is power. And power, in its quiet form, is what draws people back. It's around this time that her emotions will fluctuate wildly. One day, she'll be cold, defensive, distant. The next, she'll send something sentimental or vulnerable. These are emotional checks, not manipulations. She's trying to locate the version of you she remembers, the one who would instantly react. But that man is gone. You've learned to live in your silence, and your silence is now your strength. When you don't respond to every fluctuation, when you stop matching her mood, something profound happens. She begins to stabilize too. She starts mirroring your calm instead of you mirroring her chaos. That's the point where real change becomes possible. Because emotional polarity is like a mirror. The person who holds still changes the reflection. So hold still. Don't over-explain. Don't rush back in. Don't break your own rhythm just because she's noticing what she lost. Let the absence do its work. Because when a woman begins to feel your absence, not your anger, not your indifference, but your peace, it forces her to confront a truth she's been avoiding, that your presence was never the problem, it was her taking it for granted. And when she reaches that point of realization, the game changes. Not because you've won, but because now she's seeing you clearly again. Not as a convenience, not as a constant, but as a choice. That's the shift. Not when she texts. Not when she misses you. But when you stop needing her to. That's when attraction returns, not through distance, but through discipline. And in that moment, you'll understand what this whole process was really about. It was never about making her chase you. It was about reminding yourself that you were never supposed to chase anyone. Something strange happens when you stop chasing. The world, the people in it, and most importantly she, begin to mirror back the energy you give out. At first, it feels like coincidence. Her tone softens, her words slow down, she lingers longer in the room, maybe even smiles a bit more. But it's not coincidence. It's alignment. Because for the first time in a long time, you've stopped radiating chaos. You've stopped sending out that invisible signal that says, validate me, reassure me, see me. And when that signal disappears, the entire dynamic changes. The energy flow reverses. 4 years, you were the emotional pursuer. You tried to fix things by doing more, texting first, planning dates, apologizing for things that weren't your fault, trying to decode her moods like they were puzzles with secret answers. But now you're not doing any of that. You're just being calm, steady, grounded. You've stopped trying to manage the connection, and that's exactly what makes the connection start to manage itself. That's the mirror effect. When you stop chasing, you stop interrupting the natural feedback loop of attraction. Because energy, emotional or physical, doesn't disappear, it redirects. Your silence becomes her reflection. Your peace becomes her contrast. Your absence becomes her awareness. And one day, she begins to behave like you used to. She checks her phone. She waits longer for replies. She brings up random topics just to keep the conversation alive. It doesn't look like much from the outside, but it's massive, because it means she's beginning to feel the same uncertainty you once drowned in. But this isn't about revenge. It's about balance. When two people fall out of sync, someone always overextends. Someone starts running while the other walks. But energy, in every system, demands equilibrium. And once you stop running, she can't just stand still anymore. She has to move closer to re-establish the rhythm. The mirror effect doesn't just happen in romance, it's a universal principle. The world responds to your state. If you act out of lack, you attract confusion. If you act out of peace, you attract respect. And that's what she's feeling now, respect. For the first time in a long time, she's not just seeing you as the man who fills her needs. She's starting to see you as a man who has his own. The same man she once fell for, before routine, resentment, and expectation buried him under years of emotional servitude. You're no longer a satellite in her orbit. You've become your own gravity again. And gravity pulls things toward it naturally. This is the part where everything starts to get interesting. Because when she starts reflecting your energy, it creates tension. You'll notice the tone of her messages change. Shorter, more hesitant, a little unsure. She'll ask indirect questions. How have you been lately? You've been quiet, busy? Are you seeing anyone? They sound harmless, but they carry weight. They're emotional radar signals, testing to see if your calm is real or just another tactic. This is where most men fail the test, because they confuse reflection with reconciliation. Just because she's mirroring your energy doesn't mean she's ready to match it. Reflection happens before realization. It's the body's way of saying, something feels different. Her conscious mind hasn't caught up yet. So don't rush it. Keep your responses measured. Warm but firm. Interested but detached. Never cold. Coldness is insecurity wearing armor. You don't need armor anymore. You've already outgrown the war. Because now, she's the one experiencing the emotional dissonance. The same tension you used to live with, the constant wondering, the anxious replaying of conversations, the "what if he's done with me?" loop, it's hers now. But not as punishment. As perspective. This is how growth happens in relationships. Not through blame, but through experience. She's now standing in the same emotional space you were forced to confront. And through that mirror, she's learning empathy. But empathy alone doesn't fix anything. Awareness without accountability is just nostalgia. That's why this phase demands patience. Because her reflection of your energy isn't the final stage, it's the preparation for change. If you rush in now, if you give her the comfort of your full attention too soon, she won't complete the lesson the distance was teaching her. You'll rob her of the growth the silence was meant to create. Let her feel the mirror. Let her sit in her own confusion the same way you did. It's not cruelty, it's clarity. Because eventually, that reflection will turn inward. She'll start asking herself the same questions you asked in the beginning. Why did I stop appreciating him? When did I become so reactive? Why do I miss his calm more than his words? That's when something rare happens. She stops looking at you as the problem and starts looking at herself as part of the equation. And when that happens, the entire emotional balance shifts again. That's when she starts showing genuine vulnerability, not the defensive kind that hides behind sarcasm or anger, but the quiet kind that says, I see what I did. I see who you've become. You'll recognize it instantly. Her words will sound different. The tone will be softer, the timing unforced. She won't be testing anymore, she'll be reaching. That's the beginning of reconnection. But here's where you need to be careful. Because if you meet that vulnerability with arrogance, if you use your newfound power to prove a point, you'll destroy the very respect you've rebuilt. Power in relationships isn't about control, it's about composure. You don't need to make her feel small to feel strong. True strength is quiet. It's not, I told you so. It's, I understand. You're not the man trying to win her back anymore, you're the man she has to rise to meet. That's the mirror effect's final form. Reflection becomes recognition. She sees your calm, your focus, your independence, and it awakens her own. She starts to meet you where you are instead of pulling you back to where she left you. When that happens, it's not about who chased who. It's about two people finally moving at the same pace again. Not out of fear, not out of need, but out of mutual respect. That's when attraction turns into admiration. And admiration, not obsession, is what sustains love. So when she finally reflects your peace back to you, when you see your own stillness mirrored in her eyes, you'll understand what this whole process was really about. You weren't trying to make her miss you. You were teaching both of you how to see clearly again. It doesn't happen with fireworks. It happens quietly, slowly, like dawn creeping through the blinds after a long night. One day, the tension that used to fill every silence between you softens. She's not defensive anymore. You're not explaining anymore. The air feels different, lighter, calmer, cleaner. You've both stopped trying to win. That's the beginning of reconnection. See, people think relationships die from lack of love. But that's rarely true. Most die from a lack of respect. The moment one person starts believing they can cross boundaries without consequence, the foundation begins to rot. And the longer that goes unaddressed, the more resentment fills the cracks. But distance, real distance, not coldness, not spite, creates contrast. It reminds both of you what respect feels like again. Because respect isn't built through words. It's built through energy. Through actions that say, I value myself enough not to tolerate disrespect, and I value you enough not to give it. When you stopped chasing, you didn't just regain self-control, you reintroduced balance. You reminded her, without saying a word, that your presence is earned through mutual effort, not entitlement. So when she begins reaching out now, it's different. You can feel it. There's no edge in her voice, no hidden test behind her words. She's not trying to control anymore, she's trying to connect. You'll notice she starts showing curiosity again. Not surface curiosity about what you're doing or who you're seeing, but genuine interest in how you've changed. She asks about your projects, your routines, your thoughts. Her energy isn't defensive, it's receptive. That's the signal that something deep has shifted. Because women don't fall for words, they fall for presence. The same presence they once felt when you were still centered, before you lost yourself trying to please them. And that's the presence you've rebuilt. But this is the phase that tests maturity, for both of you. Because reconnection isn't reconciliation yet. It's a fragile bridge, not a rebuilt house. One wrong move, one rush back into old habits, and it collapses. You can't meet this new energy with old patterns. If she opens up and you flood her with attention, if you over-explain or over-promise, you'll trigger her old comfort zones. She'll subconsciously slip back into the dynamic that killed the relationship in the first place. The key now is patience. Let the connection rebuild itself naturally, rhythmically, like breathing. Let her speak. Let silence exist between sentences. Don't fill every gap with words. Fill it with calm. That calm is what she's truly responding to. And as that energy steadies, something beautiful happens. Respect begins to replace control. She stops trying to win arguments. You stop trying to avoid them. You start talking again. Not to fix, not to persuade, but to understand. And in those moments, you'll realize something. You were never fighting each other. You were both fighting for a feeling, safety. She fought to feel secure through control. You fought to feel secure through approval. Both were forms of fear. But fear is loud. Respect is quiet. And when respect returns, everything else follows. The tension, the resentment, the defensiveness, they lose their fuel. You're not walking on eggshells anymore. You're walking with awareness. The conversations start to go deeper. You talk about real things. Not gossip, not complaints, but truth. You tell her how the silence changed you. You admit where you lost yourself, not as a confession, but as a statement of growth. You share insights, not accusations. And when she listens, you'll see something flicker behind her eyes that you haven't seen in years. Admiration. Because admiration isn't born from perfection. It's born from integrity. From seeing someone who had the courage to walk through discomfort instead of running from it. She'll realize that the distance wasn't a punishment, it was a correction. You didn't pull away to hurt her. You pulled away to heal what couldn't survive constant closeness. And ironically, that's what brought her back. But don't mistake this phase for a fairy tale ending. The real test begins here. Because now that she's leaning in, every part of you that craves validation will want to rush in and meet her halfway. Your instincts will whisper, "You've done it. You can relax now." But that's the trap. Because if you drop your boundaries too fast, you teach her that your strength was conditional. That it only existed to get a reaction, not because it was real. So you hold steady. You stay kind but firm. Warm but grounded. You maintain your rhythm. You don't abandon your new habits. You keep your focus. You stay in motion. Because your growth isn't about her. It's about you. She's not the finish line. She's just part of the story. As this new rhythm stabilizes, something subtle begins to happen in her. She starts mirroring your peace. Her tone changes. Her eyes soften. She begins to slow down, to breathe deeper around you. She doesn't need to prove her independence anymore, because she finally feels safe in your steadiness. That's the secret nobody tells you. When you lead yourself, you lead the relationship. Leadership doesn't mean dominance, it means direction. And when you move with direction, people naturally follow. She'll start to initiate closeness again. But this time, it won't come from fear of loss. It'll come from genuine respect. And respect is what keeps love alive long after passion fades. Because passion can be reignited, but respect, once lost, is almost impossible to restore. You've done something most people never manage to do. You've rebuilt respect from the ashes of comfort. You've proven that love doesn't need to be suffocating to be strong. And the beauty of this phase is that it doesn't depend on her response anymore. Whether she fully reconnects or not, you've already won. You've already reclaimed yourself. Because the truth is, when you stop chasing, you don't lose love. You find it again inside yourself. And from that place, every connection you build afterward, whether with her or someone new, will come from power, not need. That's the moment the man you were becomes the man you were meant to be. And that's when peace stops being a strategy and becomes your state. This is the part no one warns you about. You think the hardest part was the silence, the distance, the cold nights where your phone didn't buzz and your mind screamed for contact. But the real test isn't surviving her absence. It's surviving her return. Because when she comes back, when she starts smiling again, touching your arm, looking at you with that familiar softness, a part of you will want to forget everything. To erase the lessons, to pretend the pain was just a bad dream, to believe you can go back to how things were before. That urge, that hunger to slip back into comfort, is the most dangerous phase of all. It's the temptation phase. And make no mistake, it will test every inch of your growth. Because now she's warm again. Affectionate again. Maybe even passionate again. The same woman who was once cold, distant, distracted is now flirting, laughing, initiating conversations, making plans. It feels like victory. You start to think, I did it. I fixed it. We're back. But here's the truth most men can't swallow: you're not back. You're being tested. Not consciously, not maliciously, but biologically and emotionally. See, when a woman feels the distance close, her nervous system relaxes. The fear of loss subsides. And as soon as that happens, the subconscious pattern that created the original imbalance tries to reassert itself. It's not her fault, it's muscle memory. You'll recognize it in small ways at first. The little sarcastic remarks. The subtle shifts in tone. The way she assumes you'll drop your plans to accommodate hers again. The same dynamic that used to suffocate you will start creeping back in under the disguise of intimacy. And here's the cruel irony. It'll feel good. It'll feel comforting to slide back into the rhythm you once knew. To be wanted again, needed again, validated again. But what feels comfortable isn't always what's healthy. You didn't walk through the fire just to return to the ashes. This is the moment when every ounce of your progress gets tested. Because the temptation phase isn't about her, it's about you versus your old self. Will you stay grounded in your newfound strength, or will you trade it away for temporary peace? Here's how it usually happens. She starts initiating closeness again. Maybe physical affection, maybe emotional vulnerability. You respond. The connection feels electric again, almost like the early days. She laughs more. You relax. And just as you start to think the worst is over, the shift happens. She tests. Not because she's cruel, but because she needs to know if your new strength is real or performative. She'll say something dismissive, or ignore a boundary, or push a limit just to see what happens. If you fold, if you go back to the man who over-explains, overreacts, overgives, the illusion breaks. You confirm that your transformation was temporary. But if you hold steady, if you stay kind yet firm, calm yet clear, you send the message that your peace isn't conditional anymore. It's who you are now. That's when the attraction deepens. Not the shallow spark of novelty, but the heavy, magnetic pull of respect. Because deep down, what most women crave isn't control, it's certainty. The certainty that the man beside them won't lose himself under pressure. That he won't trade his purpose for approval. That his emotions are steady enough to lead through chaos. That's what the temptation phase is about. It's not about resisting her, it's about proving to both of you that you're no longer led by fear. The first time she notices it, you'll see it in her eyes. That flicker of confusion, then curiosity, then admiration. She won't say it out loud, but she'll feel it. Something's different about him now. Because you've stopped chasing highs and lows. You've stopped being emotionally reactive. You're not fighting to be understood anymore. You're simply being understood by your actions. You've become the calm center in her storm. And paradoxically, that's what reignites the passion she thought was gone. But don't confuse this stage with a permanent fix. Old habits are resilient. They don't die quietly. They fade through repetition. Every moment of closeness will be an invitation to regress or reaffirm your new frame. She'll try to pull you into old arguments just to see if you'll engage the way you used to. You'll feel the familiar hooks, defensiveness, guilt, the urge to explain, but you'll notice something new. You don't have to respond. You can breathe instead. You can walk away instead. You can smile and let silence do the talking. That silence used to be your weakness. Now it's your shield. And when she realizes that the old triggers don't work anymore, she'll stop pressing them. Because people stop testing what no longer reacts. That's when you reach a new kind of peace, one that doesn't depend on distance or closeness, but on balance. You'll notice how differently you carry yourself now. You speak slower. You listen more. You don't seek to prove points. You let truth reveal itself naturally. Your body language shifts. More grounded, more relaxed. That quiet confidence isn't arrogance. It's the byproduct of self-respect. And self-respect, once internalized, changes everything. The temptation phase, if navigated correctly, becomes the crucible that solidifies your transformation. Because the more you resist falling back into old patterns, the more those patterns lose their power. Soon, she'll stop testing altogether. Not because she's given up, but because she's finally learned what you already discovered. Peace feels better than control. And that's when something extraordinary happens. The relationship no longer feels like a tug of war. It feels like partnership again. Two people, side by side, walking at the same pace. Not trying to win, not trying to dominate, just moving in rhythm. But remember this, the real reward of this phase isn't her renewed affection. It's that you now know who you are without it. You've learned how to hold space for love without losing yourself in it. You've learned that peace doesn't come from being chosen, it comes from being complete. And when you reach that point, you stop needing reassurance. You stop fearing loss. You stop negotiating your worth. Because the man who once begged for connection has finally learned the truth. Real connection begins the moment you stop begging for it. That's the final lesson of the temptation phase. That love doesn't require surrender. It requires stability. There's a quiet turning point in every relationship that survives the storm. It doesn't announce itself. There's no dramatic confrontation, no cinematic reconciliation, no grand speech. It's subtle, a look across the room, a tone in her voice, a moment of stillness where you realize something fundamental has changed. She's no longer trying to lead the rhythm. She's moving with it. That's the power shift. And it's not about dominance or control. It's about gravity. 4 months, maybe years, the relationship revolved around her emotions. Her moods dictated your responses. Her silence decided your tone. Her approval determined your peace. You were reacting instead of guiding. You were trying to keep the balance by surrendering yours. But when you stopped chasing, when you recentered, when you finally detached your sense of worth from her reactions, the polarity inverted. You became the still point. And she began to orbit that steadiness, not because she was forced to, but because peace has a pull stronger than chaos. Women follow emotional gravity. Not words. Not charm. Not logic. Gravity. When you're grounded, she feels safe. When you're unshaken, she relaxes. When you know who you are, she stops questioning what you are. That's what leadership looks like in love. Not telling her what to do, but showing her who you are. See, when a man is unstable, his emotions become contagious. The entire relationship starts vibrating with uncertainty. But when he's calm, decisive, and authentic, that energy spreads too. It gives her permission to drop her guard. To stop fighting invisible wars in her head. To trust again. That's why this shift feels so powerful, because it's not control, it's alignment. But don't mistake alignment for perfection. There will still be disagreements. There will still be friction. The difference now is that the arguments no longer threaten the foundation. She knows you won't explode. You know she won't run. The drama is gone because the fear is gone. You've reintroduced security into a space that used to be ruled by anxiety. The way she looks at you starts to change. The skepticism fades. The edge softens. Her tone becomes lighter, more feminine, less defensive. She stops talking to you like a rival and starts speaking to you like a partner again. She listens differently, not to argue, but to understand. And that's when you realize something profound. She was never the enemy. The real battle was always with your own lack of boundaries, your fear of conflict, your addiction to approval. You weren't trying to win her. You were trying not to lose yourself. And now that you've stopped treating peace like a reward and started treating it like a discipline, she can feel it. The shift isn't just emotional. It's visible. It's in the way you walk into a room, in how you speak, in how you hold eye contact. You're not performing confidence anymore. You are it. That authenticity is magnetic. You'll start noticing how her body language mirrors yours now. She leans in when you talk. She reaches for your arm when she laughs. She's drawn to your steadiness the same way you're drawn to calm water after a storm. But here's the truth about this new phase. It requires humility. Because it's easy to mistake her renewed attention for proof of dominance. You might start thinking, I have the power now. But that's just ego trying to hijack growth. The real victory isn't having control. It's having balance. If you start leading with arrogance, you'll create the same imbalance in reverse. If you treat her submission as validation instead of trust, the cycle will restart under a new disguise. Leadership in love isn't about standing above her, it's about standing firm beside her. When she begins following your lead, it's not because she's weaker. It's because she's responding to strength that finally feels safe. That's the kind of power that doesn't need to be spoken. It's not loud. It's quiet, composed, unshakable. It's the kind of power that doesn't demand attention, it earns it effortlessly. This is when attraction matures into devotion. Because deep down, she doesn't crave a man who dominates her. She craves a man she doesn't have to manage. Someone she can trust to remain composed even when life gets unpredictable. Someone who brings stability to her chaos without suffocating her freedom. That's what this new dynamic feels like. You're no longer two people trying to control each other's emotions. You're two people regulating each other's peace. She doesn't have to fight for attention anymore. You don't have to beg for respect. It's mutual, effortless, natural. And that's when the relationship starts to feel alive again. Not because it's perfect, but because it's balanced. You'll find that the smallest moments start to feel profound. Cooking together, sitting in silence, taking a walk without checking your phones. There's no tension, no unspoken resentment, just presence. She starts expressing gratitude again. Not the empty kind you used to chase, but genuine appreciation for your steadiness, for your consistency. That's the invisible power of this phase. When she follows your lead, it's not submission, it's surrender to peace. You've become the emotional anchor she didn't know she needed. Not because you told her to, but because you showed her what calm feels like. And in return, you start to feel something you haven't in years. Admiration. Admiration isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the way she looks at you when you're not watching. It's the small gestures that say, I trust you again. But here's the most important thing to remember. Don't let comfort dull your discipline. Just because the energy has shifted doesn't mean the work is over. Growth doesn't stop at peace. It deepens through it. Keep leading with purpose. Keep showing up for yourself. Keep protecting the stillness that took you so long to earn. Because this phase isn't an ending. It's a beginning. When she starts following your lead, it means the relationship is ready for something rare. A new foundation built not on control or fear, but on mutual growth. You're no longer fighting to keep her. You're walking beside her because both of you want to be there. That's real power. Not dominance. Not distance. Direction. There comes a moment in every man's journey when the noise finally stops. Not because everything outside of him went quiet, but because he did. It's not peace you earn through victory, or through getting what you want. It's peace that arrives because you no longer need anything to confirm who you are. That's the final evolution. You've gone through the distance, the silence, the temptation, the power shift, and now you stand in a space you've probably never felt before. You're calm, steady, clear. Not in the way people describe in books or quotes, but in a way that feels lived, earned, anchored in your bones. This is when you finally understand what love actually means. Not the frantic craving, not the obsession, not the constant negotiation of worth. Love, in its purest form, is freedom, not escape. Freedom within connection. Because for years, you believed love meant losing yourself. You thought devotion meant giving up your center, that compromise meant self-erasure, that peace meant silence. You confused comfort with connection and sacrifice with loyalty. You learned how to please, how to fix, how to stay, but not how to lead with peace. And the truth is, most men never make it past that point. They either give up on love altogether or they keep repeating the same cycle. Chasing, fixing, collapsing, rebuilding, again and again, until they become ghosts inside their own lives. But you didn't. You stopped. You faced the silence, and you learned to live inside it. That's when everything began to change. You stopped reacting to her moods. You stopped measuring your worth through her approval. You stopped negotiating your value every time she pulled away. And in doing so, you discovered something bigger than love: self-respect. That's the secret ending most people never see coming. Because this whole journey wasn't about her. It was about you finding yourself again beneath the noise of needing to be chosen. You realize now that control, whether it came through chasing or distancing, was always a symptom of fear. You were afraid of being unseen, of being unloved, of being left behind. But when you learned to be alone without collapsing, you rewired your entire nervous system. You stopped chasing validation and started radiating calm. And that calm became magnetic. Now, when she looks at you, she doesn't see a man trying to prove something. She sees a man who already is something. A man who can hold space without demanding anything in return. That's the paradox of evolution in love. The less you need control, the more influence you actually have. Because control is rooted in fear, but influence comes from respect. And respect can't be forced. It's cultivated through presence, consistency, and integrity, the three currencies of masculine energy that no amount of money or charm can buy. You've stopped chasing highs. You've stopped fearing lows. You've learned that relationships don't need to be dramatic to be deep. That stillness isn't boring. It's sacred. So what happens now? Now, you begin to live differently. You wake up and move with purpose, not pressure. You lead with intention, not insecurity. You speak with clarity, not volume. You listen without planning a rebuttal. You understand that silence can hold more power than arguments. You don't beg to be understood anymore. You communicate to connect. You don't chase attention anymore. You attract through calm. You don't demand love anymore. You embody it. This doesn't mean you become detached or cold. It means you finally learn the art of balanced intimacy, being fully open while staying fully grounded. You don't need to hold her to keep her close. You don't need to prove your worth to be worthy. You've stepped into a version of manhood that isn't taught, it's remembered. And when you live like that, people feel it. Not just her. Everyone. Friends, family, co-workers, even strangers. They sense the quiet stability in your tone, the lack of urgency in your energy. You've become the kind of man who doesn't chase outcomes. He builds them. And that's what she responds to most. Because now, being with you doesn't feel like a performance. It feels like peace. The relationship no longer revolves around who's right or wrong, who's leading or following, it revolves around truth. Two people who have learned to be whole on their own, choosing each other freely, not fearfully. And if she couldn't meet you there, if the relationship didn't survive the transformation, that's okay too. Because what you built inside yourself can't be taken away. You no longer need a relationship to validate your masculinity. You carry it with you. That's the final lesson. Love isn't something you earn through control or sacrifice. It's something you reflect once you've made peace with yourself. When you stop demanding that others fill your emptiness, you stop attracting chaos disguised as love. When you stop confusing attention for connection, you stop settling for half-hearted affection. And when you stop chasing peace through other people, you finally start living from it. That's what distancing was always about. Not separation, but calibration. It was never about pushing her away. It was about pulling yourself back together. You thought you were losing her. But what you were really losing was the version of you that needed her to feel whole. Now, you stand in quiet power. You don't chase. You don't perform. You don't shrink. You lead. And that's the irony of this entire journey. Once you stop trying to make someone love you, you finally become someone capable of love, real, grounded, peaceful love. No longer desperate. No longer reactive. Just present. That's when she looks at you differently. That's when new people notice your energy before your words. That's when life itself starts to respond. Because everything in this world, people, opportunities, relationships, gravitates toward stability. And you've become it. So when you finally stop needing control to feel love, you don't lose anything. You gain everything. You gain yourself. You gain peace. You gain freedom. And for the first time in your life, that's enough.